Welcome to the Exit Rich podcast, where the leading authority on buying, selling, fixing, and growing companies, Seiler Tucker, is dedicated to helping you find the path to retire rich and move on to your next adventure by exiting your business for the desired dream price you deserve. Get ready to exit rich with your host, Seiler Tucker.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Exit Rich. Every week, we bring you a really unique, profound guest that adds tons and tons and tons of value to your personal life and, of course, your business life. And today is going to be no different. In fact, today is going to be exceptional. And it's going to be exceptional because we have the one, the only, the famous Miss Joan Pastor, who is an award-winning, highly compassionate and results-driven clinical psychologist with over 28 years of experience in diagnostics, assessment-based executive career and organizational coaching, all areas of leadership, brain enhancement, and emotional self-regulation. Boy, we all need that. Joan also specializes in all areas of career and financial success, transforming the beliefs, behaviors, and building resiliency and innovation. She works with introverted. I didn't even know this was a thing, but she works with introverted and extroverted leadership development. Think about that. She's going to get more into that when she comes on. Her expertise is focused on best decision making. Oh my gosh, how many times have we gone back and said, why did I make that decision? What was I thinking? And then she also really focuses on not just best decision making, but practical life business coaching and mediation skills. All of us. Though, you know what, Joan, you should be in the White House because the White House needs mediation skills more than anyone. Joan says you can have the life you want. It's not just a dream, it can be a promise. So welcome to the show, Joan. We're so excited to have you. I need to tell my audience that you and I became really fast friends after meeting about 3 or 4 months ago. And yes. So I'm delighted, excited to have you on the show. And I can't wait to get into all of your golden nuggets and share your value and words of wisdom. And Joe's been in this arena forever. Now, let me just preface this. We've all heard of coaches. We've all heard of life coaches. We've all heard of business coaches. In fact, we have a business coaching program where we really help our clients and what we call the road to exit rich to get your business ready to sell and maximize value so you can build a scalable, sellable, and sustainable business. With Joan, she's the real deal. She has more experience than probably most of these business coaches. And she's older than them. So obviously she has more experience. But she has a lot more wisdom. And she works with some of the biggest companies like Boeing. And I'm sure she could mention a bunch of others. But she's got an amazing reputation, and I think you should really fasten your seatbelt, listen to Joan for the next 45 minutes to an hour, and it's going to be a fun ride. Let's get ready. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you, Michelle. You're one of my favorite people. You know that.
Aw. Well, I'll make it to the favorite. I'm always striving to be better. So, Joan, tell me.
Not necessary. You're already excellent as you are.
Thank you. So what's and people say, Michelle, you're excellent. And I think the reason why some people are excellent, why some are not, is because they have a higher level of standards. And I have a very high level of standards. But I really want to dig into Miss Joan Pastor and find out a little bit about her background, because we all were little girls and little boys at one time. And what was Miss Joan like as a little girl? I can't wait to hear this.
Oh my goodness, what was I like as a little girl?
And how did you get into this? And how did you get in it? How did you get into psychology?
Oh, well, that's actually, okay, how do I make a long story very short?
Very short.
Well, it was a couple of things. It was, you know how it is. It's like a perfect storm, right? You have this event and then that event and then that event, and it all says the same thing. So your path for me, my path became pretty clear by the time I was like 11, 10 or 11 years old. But part of it was because I was very fortunate. My father had one of the most successful electrical contracting companies out of Detroit and in the state of Michigan. And if you're from Michigan, we wired the Renaissance Center, the Lincoln Tunnels, a lot of famous places. And so it was great growing up in that because I would go to the office and I fell in love with business. I just loved business. But I loved especially the people aspects of it. So not only like the structure of business and how do you bring in contracts and how do you execute them, but also how, to accomplish a project and get really good results. And my whole family, I was the youngest of three, and then my mom and dad, they all saw very early on that I had both this business nose and people nose. And few women back then at my age got support from the family, let alone the fathers, or the men. That time it was the men to the boys. But even my brother was supportive. And so I started early on just really having this affinity for just not only business and how business gets successful, but people. How do people get successful with and in and through business? And I felt the two to go together. And then when I was 11, the last little piece fell together. I think I was 11, I'd have to check, but fascinated. I was in the car driving with my folks, and I was in the back seat. That's where the kids were all the time, right? So we're in the back seat. And but I heard on the radio something about this, and I said to my mom and dad. My mom and dad were talking about it, kind of in a low voice because it was an assassination. And I said, "What's going on?" So they explained to me what had happened. And at that moment, something just all clicked for me. And I realized my interest in business, in people. And this was like, how do people come to think like that they would take that action? How do people see reality that they would actually do something like assassinate another human being? And a human being that my parents told me, because I didn't know him at the time, said was a wonderful, man. And I decided then, I was very clear that when I grew up, I wanted to understand not only how the mind worked, but also how reality worked. And for that, you either go into religion, philosophy, or psychology. And actually, I did all three, but psychology really became my focus and my career. And I love it.
And you decided that at the age of 12?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know exactly what it was going to evolve into, but I was pretty clear from that point on. And then things continued to unfold for me into my teens and stuff. And so the other part of it was too, is that up until about 8th grade, I was extremely, I would say shy, which I think I was, but actually I was pretty introverted. And I know that now because as much I actually enjoyed people, but I really got my energy from going into my brain, and figuring things out, and that's a key sign of an introvert. I got a much more energy from that. Now, through a lot of hard work over decades, I would say that I'm probably ambidextrous. I mean, I really get more energy from people. I get more energy from you, Michelle. Especially
I
when I
think
like.
I'm ambidextrous too because, I told you I'm extreme extrovert where, you can see I am and people can see I am, but I also have to have that downtime where I'm really introverted. I don't want to talk on the phone. I want just more quiet time. So I can reflect. So one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to, and thank you for sharing your background. Um, one of, and I will congratulate you on knowing what direction you want to go on so early in life, and that was great support you have with your family. I've got adults right now, adult clients that don't know what they want to do. So I think it's really important to have that clarity. But one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on, not only are you my friend, but you have a tremendous amount of experience in business and mergers and acquisitions and um, private equity companies,
Mhm.
venture capital companies, etc. And most of our listeners are business owners, existing business owners, some startups, and always looking for great advice in business. So I thought, oh my gosh, who better than Joan to bring on? And so I know you've had a lot of experience working with venture capital companies to build their startups. Can you share some advice? Because I know we have a lot of startups listening
Sure.
from all over the world.
From all over the world. That's wonderful because I'm giving a talk on global cultural diversity in Amsterdam in July. So global diversity is a key special interest of mine. Venture capital, the way that started, it was really funny. When I first started out way back when, there was no such thing as coaches, by the way. It wasn't called coaching, it was coaching. And my first work was with startups, but we didn't call them startups. We just called them small businesses that needed funding. And I just happened to fall into medical practices. So not so much psychologists like myself, but like doctors, because a lot of doctors and stuff don't want to be business people. They're actually really bad business people. And so
I know I have medical clinics and I work with a lot of doctors, and
yeah,
I concur.
it's not their cup of tea. And so they were delighted when they had somebody with a medical background that actually loves business and loves to grow them. So I did a lot of that in my early years. I would have to say back in the 80s and 90s. And then really big projects, big companies came along. And so I got away from it for a while. And then it came back right before the pandemic. It was very interesting. And I was very fortunate. I had just finished a huge contract with a Fortune 50 company. And then the pandemic hit. And, everybody was shutting down except startups. For some reason, and people who back in the pandemic will know this, if they were doing a startup then, for some reason, we don't know why, but three things happened that was so odd. Nobody expected in a pandemic. Number one, the stock market soared. Number two, and number three, everybody wanted to buy a startup. I mean, venture capitalists.
Everyone wanted to buy what?
Everybody wanted to buy a startup.
Yeah.
They wanted to invest in startups. And it was really interesting because I had a client who I was very blessed. I'd done a lot of work for the Department of Defense under the Clinton administration, actually under not just Clinton, but, oh my God, I'm blanking. The president.
Oh, we should have put that in your bio that you worked for the Clinton administration.
No, I'm really so, but mainly, especially in the Clinton administration, and the person who was the deputy director of the National Security Agency, he had retired young, and then he became a very successful venture capitalist, a partner with a very successful company that's, to my opinion, one of the only inevitable VC firms out there. There's a lot of people out there who call them coaches that are not. There's a lot of people out there that call them VC people that don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of startups that don't know how to run a business. They have a technology or they're a doctor.
A lot of existing business owners that don't know how to run a business.
And that's what happened. I got a call from my old client, and he said, his name is Bill. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Looking for work." It was 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. And he said, "Well, I've got a job for you." And I said, "Great." And he said, "Have you worked with small companies before?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But long ago, And so he brought me in. They referred me into one of their companies. And they had put in the initial investment. So Series A was done. But they weren't sure that the chief executive team was going to be the right team or the best team, which turned out to be far from the truth. It turned out to be an excellent team. It's just that we had the CEO and the CTO, who were the two major people at that time. This was a technology that they were starting up and developing. It just happened to be very brainy people, but they were willing and open to learning, and so I went on, and my job was to act both of them and to teach them all the ABCs of how to communicate and come across to build decks and to just really sell, but in such a way it's not. I call it collaborative selling, which is really focus on, what is the benefit to the client, but how do you talk about that in a very specific, customized way to each client. And on top of that, each of them needed some work and wanted to work on their presentation skills. Not unusual. So it was, how do you speak? At that time it was on Zoom. And so how do we talk to people about investing in our company, right? And both to clients and other VC firms. When the pandemic and we only have Zoom and all this, and we just started working together. It was working with the CTO was different from working with the CEO because the kinds of challenges that the CTO gets. I mean, he's the tech guy, and this was technology that they were creating. So when they had all the questions and concerns about the technology, they went to the tech guy, the chief, the CTO, and he would get asked, but how come, how do you think, so we had to do a lot of like conflict management training, how do you diffuse people who are trying to accuse you of not knowing what you're doing and, and don't understand the technology, but they're supposed to, and and why should they spend money on you and all this. The CEO, we had a different purpose, and that was he had to sell the whole vision, the purpose of the company, the vision, and we worked on not just what the product itself was going to do, but who would be servicing and also the kind of culture. He was very clear about the kind of culture that he wanted to create, and it was a great culture. And it's really served him well. And it served him well also because it fits for younger generations and younger investors. So, and he's younger himself. So we work together. It's not it's a time-intensive process. I mean, I coached them for 6 hours a month for a year and a half. And after the first 4 months, PBS approached them to do a segment on one of their shows where they kind of like just spotlight new and upcoming companies. And so since I had worked in entertainment and had done some directing and stuff with documentaries before, they had me take charge of that project as well. So that was a whole nother piece that we did. It was a lot of fun and a lot of fun for me, especially, but it was fun for them too. So I got to really teach them, how to be in front of the camera and then how to talk and walk and chew gum at the same time. And we were doing at the time, everybody was wearing a mask, and it's like, and you couldn't memorize, you had to be spontaneous. And it was, and it was very, we were very pleased with what we came up with. And it's funny because it's still relevant today, except now that company they brought, let's see, I don't want to say how much money they have, but a lot. They surpassed their goal for their Series B. And I don't know if they're doing their Series C yet. I'm not sure they need to.
Let's keep it going because we're really in the weeds right now.
Okay,
and
sorry.
listeners are really going to listen to specifics. Yes, they love stories, they love case studies, but let's drill down to specifics. If there's a startup wanting to start their business, or they're already like a year or two in, and they're trying to raise venture capital, they're trying to raise funds, what are the three biggest tips that you would give them, starting with most important, second most important, third most important, so they have some real takeaways here?
I'm going to put myself in the shoes of my VC clients. I have a couple of firms now that I work with and what they look for. The first and foremost, I mean, at this point, just about everything is a product in startups. So some of them are products with services, but there's usually a product. So what is the product, and does the product really fit a niche, something that's going to excite the market, really move it forward, and people will be able to grab that and get that pretty quickly. So first and foremost, what is it what is the tech? And that now these days is technology. So what is the technology?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's going to
And
impact.
and then I would assume, what is the USP? What is their unique selling proposition, and what is their market position? How competitive is their space, and what is their market position?
Yes and no. Yes and no. There's two ways to look at that, and this is really important. Sometimes we get VCs that say, okay, you're the only ones. Certainly, what makes you unique in the market? Find out what everybody else is doing, and then what are you doing that's different and unique, and is going to really stand out, okay,
Right.
in a positive way that really push your product forward. On the other hand, we found out, because this company I worked with, one of them that I worked with is in a pretty competitive market. But you know what? There's an old saying. I used to be very, very active in the National Speakers Associations, kind of where I learned my craft of speaking. I've done over, keynotes and trainings and facilitations. And one thing the founder, Robert Cavett, said of NSA, he said, he said, the problem people have is that they think there's only a pie, and you just have to keep cutting the slices in the pie smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. He said, no. He said, when there's a lot of people, you just make a bigger pie. And so, in other words, if there's a really good product out there, being in a competitive market actually already tells people that the world is ready for it, that they want it.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how to position yours so it really
And,
stands
and
out.
it really depends upon what you're doing. Like, when you talk about a bigger piece of pie, like Walmart's a bigger piece of pie, right? So Walmart is a huge pie, but trying to go into brick and mortar right now, retail, etc., you really got to service a niche. You really got to have enough working capital. And, when I invest in businesses, which I do all the time, I look for that niche. What's unique, what's different for them.
The second,
And
yeah, and you did ask about the top three, and I want to give the other two very quickly, but they're critical. The
yeah,
second thing I would say that's most important is that the executive team, they have to know, they have to be willing to really learn and grow fast, and they have to be able to sell. But to sell collaboratively, to sell by showing value, providing value, how they're going to do. And we turned the strategy on its head, which leads me to the third item. The third critical thing is that there needs to be a good working relationship between the VC firm and the startup. What I see too much is that VC firms tend to buy, and I do not agree with this philosophy, but what they'll do is they'll do smorgasbord. They'll buy a bunch, they'll throw money at it, and then they'll just throw them out there, and they'll see who survives. It's the survival of the fittest, and the ones that are surviving on their own, they'll throw a little more money into, and the ones that aren't, they just lose them. You know what I mean? They just let them go.
yeah, and that can be a risky game, but I guess I got enough deep pockets. But how much are they actually investing from the beginning?
Well,
I'm sure it's not a huge
it's
amount, but
it,
I don't like
it's
that strategy either.
No, but it's dumb. And you'd be amazed how many VC companies do this, big VC companies too. And, they don't care because then it just becomes a write off. Oh,
Yeah,
well,
what's their
we
average
lost.
spend though? Like, let's say, what's their average spend? Is it, $1 million per company? Is it less? Is it more?
So I think that a real key sign is that if a VC company is interested, you got to be able to show them through your product, but also through your skills
Yeah,
that you're going to be able to get not only through Series A, but also Series B and whatever, more series after that, whatever is needed. There's a point, when it just begins to snowball on itself. And
right,
that's what happened in the firms that I've had, is that you get them going on how to talk about themselves and how to
right,
market themselves. And, that's what I mean by selling. And and you also have to know how to shift your communication style so that, even though the CEO might not deal with all the technical conflict issues that the CTO might get, at times they're still going to throw them at him. So he has to know how to diffuse people who are upset and nervous and, no, this will never work and da da da. And, what proof do you have? And as I said, then the third is there has to be a good working relationship with your VC folks, your investors. You have to be in alignment.
Yeah,
That's
1,000%. And so, and I agree with that. I invest in companies. I would add a fourth one there is get your messaging right. Get your
part of the
messaging
ceiling.
right. Be able
Yeah.
to articulate what you do and how you do it within a very short period of time. Because I've sat in on the pitch deck. Pitch tank is similar to Shark Tank, and I've sat on a lot of other panels at different masterminds. Plus, I invest in businesses too. And Joan, the thing that infuriates me or frustrates me, I should say, is I'm sitting there 35 minutes later and I still don't know what they do. So you got to be able in the 5 to 10 minutes to really narrow that down, get your messaging crisp, and really be able to deliver what you do, how you do it, how it's unique, and why does the marketplace need it.
You
And
know,
I've walked out of some of these pitches and I'm like, what do they do? Because we're so in the details and they need to be high level. We need a high level view. And
yes.
then if we're interested, then we'll start, those bigger conversations and I always say the devil's in the devil's in the details. And then we'll start those much higher level of conversations and get down to due diligence. But have your messaging down, have it precise, have it crisp.
Michelle, I agree with you so much. The first things I even, because sometimes I won't take a company on if I think that there's just too, it's not, I won't, it's just not worth it. I don't want to work with a failure. And if the people are not open to really learning, that's really, really critical. But
Yeah.
the first thing I have to look at is the deck. What is their current deck? I can't tell you, it blows my mind. And you know what? Not just in startups. I look at the messaging decks of even, actually well-funded companies, and I wonder, how in the world did they actually get funding? It had to be the charisma of the person, or it had to be the project itself, or which is the case often. But I mean, I look at the messaging, and oh my God, I agree with you.
Yeah,
That's
so
what,
messaging, so there's two different types of messaging, right? There's the copywriting, the messaging on paper, and then there's the verbal pitch. And I find that sometimes the paper is better than the verbal pitch. And if you're not a good pitch person, you should get somebody who is.
yes, yes, I agree. Either you need to develop those skills yourself, or absolutely you can have someone in there that is going to be a representative,
Same
at
thing
this.
with writing. I mean, we have Mitch on our team. I'm gonna give a shout out to Mitch. He's probably not even listening. But he's brilliant at writing pitch decks and business plans and things like that that our company is working with our clients right now to write their business plans and write their pitches because we are so good at it. He's so good at it. So
Yes,
I thoroughly recommend that. You look, focus on your strengths, higher your weaknesses.
I would agree. I would agree. And also sometimes hire a strength besides yours, because they might bring another perspective. So you can have compatible strengths, and
Absolutely. And then also research your competitors. I mean, I see so many entrepreneurs starting new companies and they have no idea what the competitive landscape is. And if you're going to go into business, you need to know your industry, you need to know that competitive landscape. And it's really great to learn from your competitors. To me, sometimes it's even better to learn for companies who are not your competitors. You know, like look and see how does Disney World do it now. I think Disney World needs an overhaul when it comes to organization.
yeah,
But how does Disney World do it? How does Universal Studios do it? How does the Ritz Carlton do it? How does Priceline do it? And look at how does Amazon do it? Apple. Look at some of these really big, gigantic brands and learn from other companies and see what you can extrapolate and really adapt and bring into your company.
yes, yes. You know, um, I think also when you're hiring, you want to consider, a lot of times technical people will hire other technical people. They don't know how to hire someone who's less technical. But one of the biggest gifts is to be able to translate technical information. into information that a non-technical person who has money,
Yeah.
can really understand. And so a lot of times, I have to teach people how to translate techniques, into everyday language. And it's hilarious because for you and I, Michelle, we might talk from a business standpoint, how does this product or the service provide value? And they get into the bits and the bytes, and all this technical stuff. And it's like, it's, it's like, it just doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't mean anything. So you have to be able to also really not only know who your competitors are, but also know how they're translating their product and their services.
1,000%.
And if it's great, it is. And sometimes I have to say, during the pandemic, there was some buying that was going on and valuations of companies that was going on that was purely on emotion. So there were some companies that were bought, and they got really hyped up. And that is something we have to look at now, that more than ever, people have been buying on emotion, especially in the last few years. Last year and this year, it's going to be interesting. I think, people might be getting a little bit more kind of realistic, and down to earth in terms of, okay, where's the economy?
Well, and that's a statement that I've always made too, Joan, is that people don't buy things, they buy people, right? Number one. Number two, they buy on emotion, not on logic. Now, sometimes in the larger type businesses, they're using a lot of logic because they're not going to write a check for $100 million without being, really intense due diligence, QAVs, logic, etc. But I find on the smaller businesses, it's really about emotion.
It is.
Yeah.
And even in the big businesses, you said earlier when you were introducing me that, I do believe that people can have the life they want. And I really do believe that. And it's funny because when I get together, with a client, the first thing that not the first thing, but one of the first things I'll ask them at some point in the first meeting is, what do you want? If I had a magic wand and I could wave it and I'm your fairy godmother, and ding, I could just wave it and you could have whatever you really want. What comes up for you over and over and over again? What are the things you really want? And it's funny because a lot of times people want things that they also feel guilty about. Like, you'd be amazed how many people have blocks to wanting a lot of money, or money is less important, but they want to have enough time with their family. But how are they going to do that and run a business at the same time? Or, they think it's impossible. And a lot of times people don't even know clearly what they want.
Yeah, they don't. That's why I said it was so great that you knew at a very young age exactly what you wanted. And sometimes I think we're related because when you say you wave the magic wand, I do that for buyers. I do that for sellers. I do that for employees. I do that for partners. I've been doing that for decades. So I swear to God, we're related somewhere, somehow.
It's interesting because a lot of times it's not a practical answer, but they have to go with what their vision is, and that excites emotion. The emotion and vision go together. And so if you don't feel it, in your body, it's okay if it's just a picture that you see, because somewhere attached to the picture is your emotions. But it's really important to begin to develop that clarity, because I'm just a strong believer that the clearer you get your vision, and the clearer you get that and the details and the focus, the faster things have a way of coming together. And you have to commit to the vision. You have to be able to, really commit that this is really what you want to do. A lot of times we say we want it, and then when it starts to happen, you go, so.
Yeah, they panic or, from fear. And, I always tell my clients, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, but they tend to panic. So you have to have your why. I think that you and I should actually do another podcast just on clarity, just on vision, on goals, clarity, because I talk about my GPS exit model, where I tell my clients, listen, you might not want to sell your business right now, but you have to have a GPS exit model. You have to know your destination. You don't get in a car without a GPS and just start driving because you end up driving around in circles. And
Yes.
then you need to know the GPS exit model needs to know where you're starting from. All right, you got to know where you're starting from. Where are you currently located, and what's your time frame? So we should have a podcast just on clarity because I think that would help so many entrepreneurs and individuals as well, just to get crystal clear. And that's hard, because I always say when you're in your fog, it's foggy.
I have a whole thing that I demonstrate around that. That's really, God, you and I, we just think so much alike. Yes, I would agree with you 100%. That's all I can say, 100%.
Yeah, we need to do that. So let's recap the three things because sometimes people forget. And we should also put that in the comments in the chat. Somebody listening on my team, we can put that in the chat. What are the three things again that startups should do?
Okay, so number one, if the
Just say the bullet point. Yeah, not the
product
detail.
or service has to really hit.
Yeah, so you got to have a winning product or service, number one. Number two,
Something that people can get once they even, sometimes they didn't know they needed it, but once you tell them, they get it. Like moving from plastic saran wrap to plastic baggies with color coded, you know. So,
that. Yeah.
number two is you do have to know how to use what I call collaborative sales skills. So collaborative consulting, where basically you're looking to see, is this company a good fit for our product? And whether it's a VC firm to invest or whether it's a company that might want to invest or put some money in for your product.
Or acquire a percentage of the company. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and
And then number
like,
three,
I did have a third.
that's what I wanted to know.
Oh my God, probably the most important one of all, the relationship with your VC.
Relationship with
I
your VC.
really discovered, and a lot of times, even the companies that the VC firms that I really respect, I really do. I mean, they get so busy themselves. They're not out there buying everything under the planet. They're selective, but they're still so busy. It's like they begin to lose face. So I also, as part of my contracts, I often make sure that there's regular meetings or that part of my contract allows me to talk to both sides, both parties, the startup, the CEO, but also the partner who's representing the VC, so that I can make sure that each one feels that they're on the same page with each other, and if there are some concerns and stuff coming up, I've got in there that I can either communicate on their behalf or I can bring the three of us together, to discuss. And that has worked so well. That has been so instrumental. It
Okay.
doesn't take a lot of time either.
And then number four that I added was get your messaging right. Well,
Yes.
Yes. Get those 4 points and comments. That would be great. Now, moving on a little bit, Kimberly had a question. How does a strong, I'm going to kind of tweak this question a little bit. How does a strong organization or a startup culture attract and retain top talent? Because one of the key areas is really coaching C-levels, coaching owners, coaching, VCs, business owners, private equity, etc. How does a strong startup or existing business organization culture attract and retain top talent?
It's become critical. It really has become critical.
How do they do it?
Well, the thing is that, I'm trying to think of the name of the company, and forgive me, everyone. It's the automobile company. They've just started coming out with their own cars, right? RIO, Ryoden, something like Ryoden, whatever. If anybody wants to take a look at a really amazing organizational culture, you might want to go there. And I apologize, do a fast Google and get it up there. One of my clients and I, actually, he discovered it, and he said, "This is the culture I want." And what it is, I mean, a lot of times we might say today it's a millennial culture, but it's not, because people of all ages and generations enjoy this culture. It's like, I mean, people work long hours, but it's because they love it so much and they're having so much fun, and so there's time in there. It's like you don't have to prove all the time that you're working, it's about working smart, and not so much hard. In the startup, though, you're going to need both. You're going to have to work smart and hard. But there's a lot of support. There's a lot of brainstorming together. So this is definitely a more collective kind of organizational culture. Younger people, in fact, I would say all people, really want their point of view heard. They want their input heard.
I would say all people.
I know. I mean, it might not, even if it's a silly comment, you'd be surprised. I said many times, you know what? Give me your silly, stupid ideas. I want the stupidest ones ever, So because you'd be amazed how that can be a spark for somebody else in the group. They'll say, while they're laughing, right? They go, we can't do that. But what about that? I mean, it's called hitchhiking and brainstorming. So, you hitchhike much better and get much better ideas when you're laughing and having fun than when you're serious.
Amen. My team will tell you I'm laughing all the time.
And so being supportive of people's ideas, and sometimes some people are better at good ideas than others, but everybody has their area, at least, where they can contribute good ideas. And so you want to find that, and you want to bring those out. We've had, in a couple of the cases, we've had people where we weren't quite sure what to do with them, where their best fit was in the company, but their personalities and their ability to work with other people and their ability to just, if you asked them to do something, they got it done, was just so good that it was just like, we don't know where we're going to put you, but we're not letting go of you. We're keeping you. And eventually you find a place where, okay, this is the place where you fit, and they really can shine even more, and so,
I mean, I experience the same thing. You bring somebody in and you put them in this box that you think they're going to fit best, but when you start working with them and start getting to know their talents and their broad reach, I've done that, most recently, and said, look, you're not this, but you should be this, because that's where your skills are, that's where your talents are, and I could tell that's what they're most passionate about too.
yes,
And then and you got to create that environment where people are comfortable bringing ideas or saying no to an idea. Maybe I present an idea and somebody says no to it. I know I listen. No, I'm very open-minded. Not all CEOs are open-minded, but I'm very open-minded. And they might have a better idea. So I tell every CEO, listen to your team. Listen to your team. Not only listen to your team, but look, talk to if you got a janitorial service, ask them questions. Ask everybody from all levels questions as it relates to your company.
Well, not only that, but also, and I teach this. There's a process I teach in decision making that everybody's, everybody who wants to should include, their input, and you have to be clear about who's going to make the final decision.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it will have to kick up to the CTO or the CEO or someone right underneath them, but sometimes it could be a group decision. I mean, but that's where the executive team has to be clear with their people. But a lot of people understand that. A lot of people don't want to be responsible for final decision because they know ultimately of expertise,
Yeah, it's like in our company, I'm the final decision, but I take everybody's input and then make a decision from there.
And it just makes people feel heard. And they feel that.
But let me tell you, sometimes they got a lot of great ideas. I'm like, you know what? You're right. Let's do it that way.
They do.
I had a team member yesterday who says, hey, I've been doing this. I'm like, oh my God, that's great. How can we not communicate that with the rest of the team? Because sometimes they'll have a great idea, but then they're not communicating that. And so only them are benefiting from that idea. So you need to communicate and share, people's great ideas, because a lot of team members have great ideas. They're just not always comfortable sharing them because they feel that they're going to be knocked down, they're going to be rejected, they're going to be dismissed. And I tell you, Zappos does that very well. Zappos has a huge culture around employee input, and their motto is create a happy experience. I think is their motto. Something about happy.
Yeah.
I told this story Yeah, I told this story the other day, and it's so funny because one of the ladies answered the phone, and this happened years ago. She was like, "What can I help you with?" "Oh, I need pizza. I want to order a cheese pepperoni pizza." She goes, "No, where's Apples? We sell shoes." She goes, "Yeah, we know that." As her and a bunch of her friends, and they were at, oh my God, what were they? Santa Barbara, somewhere in California, one of those parks, and they said, "We're drunk. We need pizza. You're the happy company. Make us happy." And she looked in the computer. She got the lady's name, looked at the computer, and found out that she's really a good, she's a good client. And she's like, "Where exactly are you? Hold on, please." She calls the pizza place, says exactly where they are. She goes to the other line and said, "Your pizza will be there in 10 minutes. Sit still." So that's really empowering your people to make decisions. And I think that's a culture that a lot of us should strive to get to for sure.
Yeah.
So you also said, one of the things you really specialize in, I think we already talked about this a little bit, but how do you help your clients to maximize the relationships with the key investors and vice versa? Talked a little bit about that already, but I would assume it's a lot of follow up, a lot of staying in touch, a lot of updating them on what's happening in the business. Would you agree, or can you add to that?
Sure. Well, first of all, one thing I've discovered is that it's kind of unique for every company. So it's not like I can say just do this one thing. I mean, there are some general things certainly. Certainly you have to be able to have be able to switch your message, or not switch it, but tailor it or customize it to the client. But how you get the clients can really vary widely. I've seen people get clients through, gosh, what do you call it? It's just like they do these big meetings, where like 20 people from 20 different companies, pitch their companies, right?
Right.
And they have like five. Most people don't get anywhere with that, but you know what? It's still a good idea to do it because you get to practice your messaging and your communication skills, and you get used to how you come across on camera or in front of an audience, whatever. But generally, a lot of it is actually targeted. You have to be very clear about who is the demographic that you want to go after. Who's this product really going to serve? And then who are the companies that really are the kind of companies that would make this product or would benefit the most
Hmm.
if this product was made? You see? And so you can go after them. And a lot of times they can also recommend you to investors, that specialize in their arena. But I got to tell you, a lot of it is networking.
Yeah, networking. That's how you and I met, networking.
Who you know, who you know, who you know, who you know. And one of the things that I've done with the VC firms, a lot of times, different partners, you might have some big VC firms that there might be like a number of partners, let's say 4 or 5, and then there's like people that are secondary partners, and they all have their own portfolio of companies. And I'll get to talk to them and I'll find out that a partner who has nothing to do with the company I'm working with, right? But they have people that they know. They come from a background that
Yeah.
actually where they would probably know investors that specialize in the area of the company that I'm working with. And I'll
Yeah.
just pick right up as the consultant. I'll say, good, who are they? It's like here you are partners in this company, the same VC firm, but everybody acts like it's their own independent business, which is fine. It's like you're an entrepreneur, in a VC firm with your own
Hmm.
portfolio. To
Hmm.
help each other. You got to talk to each other, the partners, and you got to share who your clientele are and who your network is. And it's interesting because a lot of times you would think that would be done naturally, but it also is interesting how many people in VC firms happen to be men, and men tend to do things on their own. They put their blinders on and they're techies and they are successful techies and they put their blinders and it's like, we're going to do it all ourselves, whatever. And they don't think about asking for help from their own. So it's funny because it's like, oh yeah, and there's been a number of times I have had to say to other partners, and say, I just spoke with so and so, and they're looking for da 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 da, and you worked in da da. I mean, people that are, and they'll go, yeah, they'll go, well, and it's funny because they will think and they'll go, well, yeah, I actually do know somebody that might be, and I mean, just the partners within their own firm, cross-referencing to each other. It's really hilarious. You get that especially when the partners are all very successful and powerful and strong in their own right, before when they came on.
Mhm.
And so that's, they tend to be used to. That's the same problem you have in big companies. It's
Yeah.
like the higher you go in the company, you got there a lot of times because it was your own resilience and strength, whatever you get up there. And then you forget, oh, I do have people here that I could maybe develop relationships with, and network and work with that are not going to try to sabotage me. They really, it really would be a mutual benefit to everybody. And so,
Yeah, I
it's
agree 1,000%. I think a lot of individuals, a lot of entrepreneurs don't even know how to network in a mastermind or network in, different conferences and meetings that they attend. And, for me, I've always said that it's not always who I've met, it's who they know, who their circle of influence is.
which
Yeah.
is why if you're a startup, it's okay to contact a a potential investor that might not be quite in your area, because most likely they'll come back. Like I have a VC person who only specializes in medical technology. So his background, he was a doctor. He hasn't practiced in a long time, but of course he knows medical, so he's done extremely well with medical technology and medical uh, inventions and interventions. And sometimes he'll, it's just interesting because, if you come to him and you say, well, we're actually, doing this technology that's going to transform food. Okay, well, food is kind of related to health, but it might still not be close enough. And so he might say, well, no, that's not really my thing. But the next question out of your mouth would be, okay, but do you know of any other investors that kind of are in the cross section of medicine and food, and
Mhm.
nutrition? And do you see?
Yeah,
So a lot of times you have to, really kind of put it out there. And
yeah, I agree. Thousand
yeah,
percent. So one of the things I wanted to bring up too, Joan, that I find so interesting, and we don't have a whole lot of time left, but when you and I first talked, I know you pretty big with Boeing and some other big companies, and you
I
said,
was with,
Michelle, you
I've
said,
been, yeah, actually a lot of big clients. So
yeah,
Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, Boeing, Nordstrom's, oh my gosh, uh, BB&T, which is now Truist, Bank, which is huge in the southeastern part of the United
yeah.
States. A lot of governments.
But what I
Both,
thought was most interesting, and I want to go back to, is that you said that, like specifically at Boeing, that you really
yes,
specialize in training introverts. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so interesting because I have one introvert on my team, and I'm like, wow, I didn't even know you could train introverts to be more extroverted. But you have this method that you
I do.
use to really get them out of
I
those
do. Well, we're
yeah,
beginning. I mean, there's a lot to go, as people know. But it's a shame with Boeing because there are there are amazing, fabulous people in that company. There really are. And it's just, I'm not going to get into the time, but I should, do a TED talk, or maybe when I'm much older, I can write a book or a paper or something on how this all happened to Boeing, because it's what happens. Organizations, if they have certain factors that come in, they develop certain kinds of cultures. And if you're not intervene, or put on safeguards, understand, or boundaries, on certain areas, and some things run amok, and then other people react. Everything in the world is around balance. And
yeah,
so if some part of a company gets out of balance with certain kind of people or a certain type, or their thinking becomes limited and too extreme in one way, then there's always an automatic reaction to the opposite end. And so, and the life seeks to balance things out. But the balance, since Boeing got a little bit out of whack, and as every organization does, every culture.
Everyone, every
right. And so then there was a, and like the, what is it? The pendulum swung from this end all the way to this end, and a lot of stuff began to come out at once. And it's interesting because, I mean, let me just say this, and this is a more kind of spiritual, philosophical thing, but I really see it a lot when it comes to organizational growth and cultures. And I think it happened with Boeing is that a lot of times, we go back to vision. What did you want? You go, this is what I want. I'm really clear about it. And I go, okay. I'll go, now are you sure? And they go, yes. And I'll say, because once you commit, the universe will do everything in its power, do you understand, to support you.
Yes.
And that also means that the things that were getting in your way before, you got to look at, well, if this has been your vision, how come you're not already there? Right?
Exactly. 1,000%.
Yeah. So what happens is you have the stuff that has not been working often comes out into the open because you have to see it for what it is so you can get rid of it or transform it or make other decisions or whatever. You understand? You have to become aware of not just all the strengths, but of the stuff that has been holding you back. And Boeing actually had made a big commitment back in about 2014, 2015 to really transform their vision. I mean, they really had. And it was funny. It was interesting because it brought about a lot of good stuff, but also brought a lot of stuff that had been buried underneath, to the surface. And it happens. It happens in families. It happens in us as individuals. When we are moving from one place and we want to move to the next level in our growth, well, what's been stopping us in the first place? Guess what? Whatever's been stopping us is going to most likely begin to emerge. It doesn't have to be a horrible thing, but things will come up that need to be addressed. And so
a lot of baggage is holding people back, and they don't realize it because they're operating in the conscious, and it's all back here, right, in the subconscious, and they're not paying attention to it. And they make decisions from triggers, they make decisions from their baggage, and they keep self-sabotaging.
They do, and that's kind of what started happens in a lot of companies, believe me. It's a very hard thing to see because after a while, it's kind of like you're breathing contaminated air, like it's orange, but you don't even realize that orange is abnormal anymore. It just seems the norm. Now, you asked about introverted people, and train them. Yeah, I have discovered a process. I discovered it through my own work and also through the work I've been doing at Boeing. And we are in the process of really looking to see, how we can take this. As I said, there's a lot of excellent people there who really do want to collaborate, and they really do want what's best, for the company and for the people in the company and for the clients and the customers. And, and they're just as upset and angry about everything that's happened as the world has been, with stuff that's happened at Boeing. And so our job is, but a lot of times, you have a culture that's aerospace and it's going to be primarily engineering. And it's going to be, there's a lot of people from the military, they came out of military. And then there's also a lot of IT, everything these days in companies is technology driven, AI driven, so you've got what I call technically trained professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And you put scientists in that category, finance people in that category. And that's where you're going to tend to find, my dissertation even found a correlation between the kind of careers that people choose, and the way that this introvert versus extrovert kind of factor. And the research has shown that, people who are more introverted, the communication skills, they would say they're poorer. I wouldn't say they're poor, but they're definitely different.
Mm-hmm.
And be a way for people, to be able to have a common language and a common language that speaks in terms of a win-win, what ultimately is going to work that's best for everybody. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want to shoot for. And so there is a way. There's a way not only to teach people how to communicate. The first thing I tell when I get in front of of engineers and IT people and technical people is I say, guess what? I say, people are logical too. People are logical too. I'm going to teach you people skills, and I'm going to teach you how people think and how people function and how people work and why they do what they do, and what you can do in response. And there's some critical skills that if you get those down, they're foundational. It's like it will increases your chances of not only you being heard, but also they're going to feel that you're hearing them. You
Right,
see,
right, right.
and that begins to build, a different kind of foundation.
Okay.
And people get very excited. And it comes, and then I also come from a place of accountability that ultimately, there's only one person that shows up at any given moment, ourselves.
I
So,
know people try to run away from themselves, and they'll always be there.
yeah, wherever you go, there you are. And
That's so
so,
true. I said that all the
yeah.
time. Yep.
And so, I think that it's important to know that, the results that show up around you, at some point, I mean, you could say, well, it's because of this, and they did that to me, and that didn't
They're
happen.
playing the victim card.
Exactly.
They're still living in the past, and
You
um,
know,
they just haven't moved past it. That's why I love Joyce Meyer so much, because she's actually identified it, moved past it, and not let it control her future. And she talks about it
no.
openly. So
And
we are almost out. We are out of time, Joan. Any last minute go to nuggets you like to leave entrepreneurs, startups, existing? Any last minute
yeah,
nuggets? Yep.
a couple things. I'll leave. The first is the two biggest things that you need to know, to become a master in your own life is, besides learning to listen and learning to learn, those are the two biggest ones, is
Wow,
to
that's
know
y'all learning to listen, which a lot of people think they're good listeners and they're not,
they're
and
horrible.
learning to learn. I have a new hire in my office. He says, I'm loving learning to learn.
And that you have to be successful in business, you have to love learning to learn. And you're going to have to deal with people. It's not just technology or whatever the product or whatever. And if it's service driven, then you have to learn how to deal with the technology, or as you said, Michelle, hire for your weaknesses,
Mhm.
so that the people who love that stuff, are good at
You don't want all the
it.
same people.
Can
You don't
take
want to hire you and you have all the same, and you'll never grow that way.
no,
No.
no, no. But I would say that, in terms of your vision, just know this: persistence is key, and errors are gonna come up, mistakes are gonna occur, stuff is gonna come and push down that you have to deal with. Just know that, and just don't give up. Don't give up. If it doesn't work, try something new. Learn from what didn't work and what did, and then try something new. And the other thing is to know that you always have a choice.
Mm.
You always have a choice. And so, sometimes it's hard to make certain decisions. I've had very successful people who started out with, oh, I want, millions of dollars and da 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 and all this sort of stuff. And then, as they start getting all that, then things starts happening in their families. They start paying more attention there, and they go, you know what? They go, I'm doing really well financially right now. I need to take a step back. I want to spend time with my kids. You understand? I want to make sure that I'm there while they're growing up. And, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to come back to wanting more money or whatever. Maybe there's a way to have both at the same time. We can put that out there.
Mhm.
But people begin, you know, you unfold and you change, and your values and what's important to you, continue to unfold and grow. And it's all good. It really is. Learning to trust your heart as well as your head is very key.
1000%. All right, Joan. Well, you've been an amazing guest, and I would love to have you back on Exit Rich. I would love the audience to type in some suggestions that they
Great.
would like Joan to talk about on the next show. Send me your suggestions. She's can talk about so many different things. She can talk about M&A when we go to sell a business and merge the two. She can talk about the culture. She can talk about how to handle that. She can talk about how you really have everything how you get everything that you want. She can talk about, the vision, the clarity, why most people don't get it, why some people do. I mean, just so many different subjects she can talk about. So I encourage everyone to go and plug that into the comments, and then we'll look at them and we'll have her on again. So Joan, thank you so much. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Oh, well, I'm ready, here's a little sign, call, da, 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 da. Let's see. The best way to reach me is probably going to be, my LinkedIn. And everybody, if you go to my LinkedIn, my website is joan.com, and you can contact me through there. But the best way is LinkedIn, and make sure when you go there that you're putting in for Joan Pastor, PhD, Executive Advisory Services. And the reason why I say the PhD is not only because I worked hard for those 3 little letters, but the PhD in there's a really cute guy in Brazil somewhere.
Okay, now all our female listeners are going to go research Joan Pastor without the PhD.
Yeah. Or Joan at jpa-international.com.
Okay, we'll include all of these in the show notes. We'll also tell you how to find a hot guy in Brazil. And
put in Joan Pastor, but a guy, it's really hilarious what comes up.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You added so much wisdom, so much value, and really gave us different things to think about. And look, I always say, and I didn't say this, but the saying, if you want different results, you've got to change your direction, right? You want the same results, keep doing the same. It's why 70% of business owners that have been in business for 10 years or longer are going out of business. It used to be startups were at great risk. Now it's existing businesses because they stopped doing what I call AIM, which is always innovate and market. Always innovate and market. But thank you so much for being on the show, Joan. We'll have you back on. And I can't wait to hear everybody's ideas of what they would love to hear you speak about. And thank you again to all my Exit Rich listeners. Make sure you share this with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your peers, your entrepreneurial network. Knowledge is power. Implementation is key, is what I always say. But make sure you get the message out there. And thank you again.
And shout out for you, Michelle. I want to put a shout out for you. Everybody, she really knows her stuff. She really knows her stuff. And, if you thought this was a good conversation, it has as much to do with the interviewer, as it does with the interviewee. And so I really just want to just give you a lot of credit, Michelle. I really think you're the real deal.
Thank you so much. I don't like fake, so I'm the real deal. Thank you again, Joan. I appreciate that. Until next time, we'll see you all or listen to you all on the next episode of Exit Rich, which is next Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the Exit Rich podcast. Don't forget to check out Michelle Seiler Tucker's Build to Sell Blueprint books and Exit Rich, along with more blogs, videos, and resources at exitrichpodcast.com. Be sure to connect with Michelle on Facebook or LinkedIn and stay tuned for her next episode by subscribing in your favorite podcast player.